December 29th, 2025, Buddha Dhamma. The end of chapter 10, conclusion. Section 5, A Noble Life, Buddha Dhamma, page 1034. The first point, increasing one's inner radiance by generating wholesome desire, by generating chanta, wholesome desire. It is normal for unawakened persons to crave, and therefore it is unrealistic to expect them to act without being entangled or influenced by craving to some degree. The important consideration here is that craving is destructive and is the source of all dukkha, suffering, for the individual and for society at large. Therefore, one should seek a solution to prevent the harm from craving. The primary solution is to utterly abandon craving and to prevent it from arising through the cessation of ignorance, which is achieved through wisdom, panya. But for the unawakened mundane person who live amidst various temptations and disturbances and whose ignorance, craving, and grasping is constantly waiting to respond to these enticements, no matter how carefully they are and how much they intend to apply wisdom, they are unable to prevent craving from playing a role at the stage or another, either on a small scale or with force, either covertly or blatantly. The most practical solution to this problem is to establish wholesome desire so that it direct one's actions to the greatest possible extent. Human beings have well-developed brains. They are not bound as other animals that are blind. Instinctual process of ignorance and craving. Human beings have the opportunity to counteract, to restrain ignorance and craving through the desire for the love of goodness. If they do not practice this restraint, humans are able to perform the most horrific atrocities simply in order to experience sense pleasures, to escape from disagreeable things, and to protect and reinforce their sense of self. Even when people appreciate the value of wholesome desire, chanta, if craving, tanha, is too strong, many of them are unable to continually act in a positive way as governed by their own sense of goodness or by their moral codes of society. Instead, they seek an easy way out in order to gratify their desires of craving, tanha. The mundane, unawakened persons are generally faced with the choice between life governed by tanha, by craving, allowing tanha, craving, to be dominant force, dictating their behavior, and a life in which wholesome desire, chanta, is elevated to prominence, in which the person gradually escapes from the power of avijja, the power of ignorance, tanha, craving, and upatana, clinging, grasping, desiring for, longing for, attachment to. If possible, one should sustain pure, unadulterated, wholesome desire, chanta. But if this is not possible, one should enlist the helps of craving, but in a way that supports wholesome desire and its condition for wholesome desire. When a person is able to establish wholesome desire as the motivating and governing force for behavior, craving will automatically be restrained and subdued. This is precisely the method advocated by Buddha Dhamma to control and abandon craving. The teachings do not advocate trying to deal with craving in a clueless and witless way without understanding the factors involved, which only increase ignorance and leads to more harm than good. The second point is wholesome desire, chanta, must be accompanied by panya, by wisdom. Concerning the subject of motivation, there are three important points for review. Let's take for the example, Two boys named Craving and Chanta have the opportunity to listen to the radio, a device they have never encountered before. Craving, Tanha, is delighted by these lovely and strange sounds. Tanha believes that he must surely be great fun to own the radio. He knows that owning a radio is cool. If he could get one, he would be extremely popular with his friends. He would be so proud of himself and show off to others. When he arrives back at home, he pesters his parents to buy him a radio. He even thinks that if this parent refuses to buy him the radio, he will sneak around the shop to find a chance to steal one. As for Chanta, he is amazed when he hears the sounds coming from the radio. He asks himself, how does this machine make these noises? How do people create such a machine? For what can a radio be used? He desires answers to these questions, and thus he pays close attention and makes inquiries. He seeks out a technician to gain more knowledge. He is so deeply impressed by the benefits of the radio that he even may want to build one from scratch. Consider how the different ways of thinking of these two boys will affect their behavior and how their conduct will influence their friends, family, and society. The initial process and mental processes of these two boys are similar. The sense base, which is the ear in this case, the sense impression, which is the sound, hearing, ear consciousness, the cognition of the sound, the contact with it, leading to sensation, and the feeling of pleasure, both following from feeling of mental processes, differ distinctly from two individuals. When Tanha, Craving, experiences the pleasurable sensation from hearing the radio, he forms an infatuation and desires more of this pleasure. Based on this desire, his thoughts are incoherent. He does not apply wise reflection. He does not reply, yo ni so mana sikara, by considering the truth, satcha, and analyzing the fact of the radio. His thoughts of sense pleasure and self-aggrandizement are determined by craving, by tanha. His thoughts feed avidya, ignorance, and intensify tanha, craving. His entire behavior is governed by tanha, by craving. Chanta, on the other hand, does not allow the process to spill over from feeling into craving. Instead, he implies yo ni so manasikara, wise reflection, in order to block all and the end of craving. Wise, rational reflection thoroughly examines the objects encountered and asks such questions as, what is this? How did this come to be? What does this depend on? What are the advantages and disadvantages? This way of thinking leads to an understanding of an object and the true value. To wholesome enthusiasm, to active engagement with the object, and a deeper learning. Although chanta, wholesome desire, is a wholesome, pure quality and beneficial to a person's life, its benefits depend on the degree of understanding concerning the truth and the value of the things a person interacts with. This is because chanta relies on a reasoned analysis, which is the beginning stage of wisdom. If a person's understanding is inadequately deep or clear, chanta may lead to errors in judgment. Therefore, in order for chanta to be truly reliable instrument for leading a person to the highest goal, the development of wisdom, or an education aimed to cultivate wisdom, is a vital principle in Buddhism. A person should begin with developing reasoned analysis, to be skilled in reflecting the truth and investigating causality, and to ask questions: what is the truth? What is truly beneficial to my life? What is worthy as a goal in life? One should then develop virtues by generating a desire for the love of truth, a love of goodness, the desire for an enhanced quality of life. By increasing these virtues, one reaches the highest stage of wisdom, which brings about utter deliverance and freedom from the mind. When chanta conditions craving, the result is most often harmful even for the well-intentioned person, even though good people may not become arrogant or overbearing by attaching to or identifying with the goodness they have created by wholesome desire. Subtle attachments can still cause a considerable amount of anguish. For example, a person may have the following thoughts: why is my house, my monastery, my wat, my temple, my school not as clean and well organized as theirs? I have tried my utmost to train this pupil and sought every possible way to provide help and advice. Why does he not improve? I have done everything to help these people become more self-reliant. Why do they not make an effort to progress as quickly as I desire? And when the causes and conditions lie beyond the power of good people to rectify, this can increase their suffering and sense of affliction. This form of suffering, dukkha, is particular to virtuous people. A base, immoral person is not troubled by such circumstances. It is fair to say that virtuous people experience a unique form of dukkha, suffering. Dukkha, suffering, then offers an opportunity for the will of mental defilements to spin once more, generating such mind states as confusion, mind states as depression, mind states as self-pity, mind states as self-indignation, mind states as restlessness, and mind states of hot-headedness. Therefore, being a good person is not enough. A good person requires help in order to be free from dukkha, suffering, to have no hidden vices, and not to be converted back to acting immorally. The factor that provides this freedom and prevents craving from returning is wisdom, which leads to the supreme liberation of the mind. A person who desires this state of liberation should apply wholesome desire to lead the way. The third point moves beyond the future spiritual benefits, samparayakata, and emphasizes the supreme benefit, paramata, which is the highest goal in Buddhism. The third point is consummate wholesome desire. The preceding material should help to dispel some common doubts, including, do arihats, who have completely done away with craving and thus cannot call upon its source of motivation, consequently become indifferent, lethargic, and spiritless? Are arihats, despite their wisdom, able to act without the desire of craving? As mentioned earlier, craving is not the whole motivating factor behind people's behavior. Moreover, craving is not only a motivation for action, it's also motivation for non-action and for laziness. Regardless of their craving induces action or non-action, it is accompanied by agitation and is unreliable. For this reason, people should cultivate a truly wholesome and secure form of desire. When people engage in such cultivation, the whole role of craving is lessened and ignorance and delusion ceases. Wisdom paves the way for the prudent application of wholesome desire, leading to blessings for one's own life and for everyone with whom one comes into contact. Eventually, when this cultivation is complete, the delusion is fully dispelled, and the realization of arihatship, one need not rely on craving as this motivation. Wisdom assists wholesome desire, chanta, to guide all of one's activities with a clear understanding that one's actions are truly beneficial. At this stage, wholesome desire directs one's activity according to the supervision by wisdom. There remains no unfinished personal business for arihats to do because they are fully satisfied and complete. Their thoughts focus entirely on how to increase the happiness of others, which conforms to the maxims of arihats. Bahu jana sukhaya lokanukampaya, to act for the happiness of the many people, the many folk, for everyone else, for the compassionate assistance of the world. In this regard, Gautama Buddha was chief, the leader. Besides acting as a guide for the people still engaged in spiritual development, he also guided awakened beings in performing good deeds for everyone, for the many folk. In this respect, Gautama Buddha was indefeatable because he was the true master, Isara Jana, a true liberated one, Seri Jana, unhindered by any internal craving. He was replenished with wholesome desire and could act to the utmost of his ability. This consummate wholesome desire is one of Gautama Buddha's attributes. It is one of the 18 qualities of the Buddha, Buddha Dhamma, referred into the phrase, the awakened, the Buddha, is endowed with unremitting wholesome desire. Nati Chandasa Hani. This is the 10th of the 18 qualities of the Buddha. Motivated by this unremitting wholesome desire, Gautama Buddha acted to liberate beings from mental impurity, from suffering and distress, and to lead them to peace by way of his great kindness and compassion. The fourth point is great beings are guided by wisdom and compassion. Wisdom does not arise in isolation. Rather, it helps to generate other virtues as well. When people fall under the way of ignorance and indulge in sensations rather than rely on understanding, they permit craving to dictate their actions. But when wisdom is cultivated, wholesome desire, chanta, grows in strength and has the opportunity to direct people's affairs without being overwhelmed by craving and delusion. Supported by wisdom, wholesome desire carries out a person's work. Furthermore, wholesome desire mobilizes their spiritual quality to help generate fulfillment and integrity. In particular, it mobilizes compassion, which plays a pivotal role in one's interaction with others. When one gains a deeper understanding of the truth and the true value of things, if one does not permit craving to interfere and take over, chanta, wholesome enthusiasm, will invariably arise. One will be inspired by the development and aspiration for goodness. One will desire that things be sustained in a state of prosperity and excellence. If one encounters a lack of such prosperity and excellence, wholesome desire will act to bring about this to fulfillment. This is the case in general. If one is relating to others sentient beings, however, wholesome desire, chanta, manifests as the state of mind, refers to as loving kindness. The desire for other beings, happiness and well-being, a wish for them to achieve prosperity, to be safe, and to be free from all forms of oppression. The wholesome desire, chanta, for other beings to abide at a state of well-being and integrity is not expressed solely by way of loving kindness. Rather, its an expression is determined by a specific circumstances that others find themselves. Loving kindness and friendliness manifest in ordinary circumstances. If these circumstances vary, however, chanta, wholesome desire, is expressed differently and is designated accordingly. In the ordinary state of affairs, accompanied by loving kindness, is labeled the first factor, and the second set of circumstances pertains to when living beings fall on hard times and are distressed, say in times of illness or destitution. In these circumstances, chanta, wholesome desire, is expressed by way of compassion, karuna, to feel empathy, to wish to help release others from dukkha, suffering. The third factor pertains to times when others rise above ordinary circumstances. Take for the example, they've finished their studies, they find employment, they are cured from an illness, they give up drinking alcohol, they turn over a new leaf and practice virtue. Here, wholesome desire is content and satisfied. One experiences appreciative joy, mudita. One shares and rejoices in the delight of others. One wishes to support them so that they continue to prosper and progress. The fourth factor is special. When others develop a sense of self-responsibility, or it is suitable that they have such responsibility that we should not interfere, this factor applies. Take, for the example, in the administration of justice and in education, take the case of parents who wish for their toddler to succeed at walking. They should look down closely and in a detached manner, allowing the children to practice on their own. They are ready to assist if the children trips, but they do not carry the children around all the time out of fear that the child may fall. This refraining from interference is referred to as equanimity, upekha. As a group of the four Brahma Viharas, Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha are usually referred to the excellent abidings or divine abidings, the four Brahma Viharas. One may wonder how equanimity, upekha, is connected to chanta, wholesome desire and well-wishing. In fact, this is the ultimate form of well-wishing based on true wisdom. One wishes for others to be successful and upright. One wishes for them to be able to abide in correctness and safety. One wishes for them to be grounded in righteousness. These are the key principal qualities that follow in the wake of wholesome desire, chanta. Everyone can develop these qualities, but they are exceptional within the minds of arihats, who are completely liberated from dukkha, suffering. When they witness how unawakened beings are tormented by dukkha, suffering, their foremost response is compassion, karuna. The problem for unawakened person is that these aforementioned situations, they tend to be governed by ignorance and craving. They will either be searching for some form of pleasure, or they will be fretting over a cherished sense of self, a self that needs protection and pampering, and therefore a pure, spacious wisdom accompanied by compassion cannot arise. There are times, however, when the mind of unawakened people is clear and spacious. They apply yoniso manasikara, wise reflection. They reflect in harmony with causality and with the truth, and thus cut off any opportunity for ignorance and craving to interfere. Wisdom here sets the stage for compassion. An arihat has made an end to ignorance and craving, and neither anxiously searches for pleasures nor worries about self-stability or self-importance. Pure wisdom is constantly prepared for wholesome desire to express compassion whenever an arihat encounters a fellow being in suffering. The end of ignorance, craving, and grasping, the end of avijja, tanha, and upatana, enables an arihat to act with purity, to act blamelessly without inhibiting defilements as fear and laziness. The motivating force behind arihat's action is comprised of two factors, wisdom and compassion, so panya and karuna. With wisdom lighting up the way of compassion, acting as the force compelling them out onwards. Karuna vedka sammutsa sita manasa, the purified ones, the Buddha and the Arihats act steadfastly, earnestly for the welfare and happiness of everyone. Their great works, Buddha Kisha, the Buddha's deeds, and the teaching activity, Sasana Kisa, has reached the result in Buddha Dhamma and the Buddhist religion, which remain to this day. Now, the fifth point, the summary of tanha and chanta, craving and wholesome desire. Some important distinction between tanha and chanta are shown. Now, let's give a basic definition of the two. First, tanha, craving. The desire, craving, thirst, the desire to obtain, the desire to acquire, the desire to exist or to not exist, the desire to consume. Chanta, wholesome desire. Delight, satisfaction, enthusiasm, love, desire, a love of truth, a love of goodness, a desire for knowledge, a desire to act. Now, the doctrinal definition from the Tipitaka or the Atidhamma. The desire for pleasure, this is tanha, sense objects. The desire for self-stability. The desire for the self to escape from past or pass away from undesirable states of existence. And for wholesome desire, chanta, a delight in the goodness of things. The desire for things to be sustained in a wholesome and prosperous way. The wish to act in order for the value and virtue of things to achieve their optimal state. Now, the simple definition of tanha, of craving, is selfish desire, desire for self-gratification, the desire for the self to exist or to cease to exist in a particular way. And the simple definition for the desire of wholesome desire, chanta, is the desire for goodness and integrity, to wish to bring about such goodness with integrity. Now let's go to the first process of tanha, of craving. The first process of craving is ignorance, which is avijja. That's feeling, right? So we have the feeling. Then it moves. So ignorance plus feeling. Then it goes to craving. And then from that craving, it goes to seeking. So avijja, vetana, tanha, and pariyesana. So that's the process of tanha. Now the process of chanta is wise reflection. And then we have perseverance. So we got yoniso manasikara, chanta, and then usaha. Those are the process of chanta. Now, for each attribute of tanha and chanta, so the attributes of craving, tanha, is it is self-centered activity. It is acquisitive. It seeks pleasure or things to indulge the self. It is blind activity. There is no consideration, say, of an object's advantages or disadvantages. Its related actions are merely conditional. There is no desire to act. Personal advantages and gain determines the action. Those are the attributes of craving, tanha. Now the attributes of chanta, wise reflection, it is not caught up with the sense of self. It involves dedicated service. It focuses on which is truly valuable and beneficial to one's life and to all things. It is the consequence of understanding. It is linked to wisdom. It is the source of action. It is the start of action. The direct result of deed determines the action. Now, as we move through, we're going to talk about the tanha mental consequences and then chanta's mental consequences. So the mental consequences from craving, tanha, is anxiety, agitation, lack of concentration. For instance, one may like something and want to acquire it, and as a result, one is restless and agitated. They may feel stress, they have suffering, mental illness, sensual pleasure, kamma sukha, material happiness, sammisa sukha, and dependent happiness. Now, the mental consequences of chanta, wholesome desire, are being at ease, being at peace, composure. Chanta is conductive to concentration, samadhi. Take, for example, one may rejoice in someone else's virtue, in a teaching or in beauty of nature, and one's mind will be absorbed, tranquil, and firmly established, conductive to mental health, beneficial to mental health, refined happiness, non-material happiness. So niramisa sukha, non-material happiness, independent happiness. Now, as we focus on the application and way of practice, so tanha, right, craving, direct way. Craving should be uprooted, eliminated, bring into cessation wherever it arises. Curb it by increasing wisdom and chanta. And then another way is strategic way, relying on craving to abandon craving, using craving to be a condition for chanta, to support wholesome desire. The application, a way of practice of chanta, wise reflection, is to practice chanta by generating it and following it accordingly. To bring it to cessation by accomplishing the task initiated by chanta. The fifth point is cultivating desire. Some people like an ordered environment for show, while others like it for its own sake. The former inclination stems from craving. Immaculate surrounding is merely a precondition for sustaining a sense of beauty. One's action may thus become overly cosmetic or excessive, leading to all sorts of problems. The later inclination, however, springs from wholesome desire. People who act with craving are interested in defeating other people, while people who act with wholesome desire wish to triumph over their work. Those with craving make grand, attention-seeking efforts at the beginning, but when the excitement fades, they become dispirited and demoralized. Those with chanta ask earnestly and in a sustained way until the work is accomplished. A person with much craving will only want to have fun. In such circumstances, there may be complicating factors involved. One may, for example, act under the pretext for developing insight. A person with much wholesome enthusiasm is able to think ahead and act for long-term benefits. Here too, there may be complicating cofactors. If craving begins to influence the process, one may start making great plans for the future. Craving is tied up with indulgence. Chanta fears no difficulties. People who love the truth want to know their own faults and shortcomings. They are pleased to acknowledge these faults as it gives them an opportunity to improve themselves. At the very best, such reflection gives them the chance to assess their own virtues. People with a lot of craving are obsessed with their own self-image. Thus, they are continually in conflict with things and are preoccupied with protecting their self-image. They derive no benefit from constructive criticism. Craving makes one careless in regard to the methods of conduct. One tries to accomplish one's aims by using any means, including uprightness means. A person who loves the truth, however, possesses both an intelligence in regard to the methods of conduct, as well as a conscience. The methods must accord with the eternal law of Dhamma. A Dhamma chanta, a love of truth, thus requires exceptional degree of mindfulness and wisdom. Some children try to repair their toys or electrical appliance, even though they have enough money to buy new ones. The reason for this action may not exclusively be the same money. It may be indeed reveal the child's wholesome enthusiasm, the child's desire for things to exist in a good, complete state. At the very least, the child desires the truth, and the adults should encourage this behavior. Those people who possess an aspiration for truth, dhammacandha, should be aware of two incorrect or erroneous ways of conduct. First, one allows craving to interfere. One allows craving to replace wholesome desire, chanta, or to seize control. Take, for example, One fails to solve a problem and then becomes depreciating. This behavior is relatively harmless. One has inadequate knowledge or one does not seek wisdom. One who loves the truth must be able to clearly distinguish the truth, or else one may make mistakes. A love of truth and knowledge of truth must thus be paired in order to accomplish one's desired goals. The second factor emphasizes the key Buddhist principles of wisdom, which is the central to the path of spiritual development. According to the Buddhist teaching, human beings possess positive and negative desires, both of which are prepared to act as motivation for action. All virtuous deeds and all actions performed to solve human problems, including the act of realizing the supreme goal of Buddhism, depend on wholesome desire known as chanta. In the same manner, all bad deeds and all actions that create dukkha, suffering, are instigated by tanha, craving, which is rooted in avijja, ignorance. Therefore, it is the responsibility of all educational and training system, all forms of Dhamma practice, to promote chanta as the impetus for wholesome action. Such wholesome actions lead to a virtuous goal, which is in turn provides true benefit and happiness both for the individual and for society. People's minds are prone to follow the currents of craving. If people are unable to cultivate chanta, the love of truth and the love of goodness, as a rival to craving, then hopefully they can at least eliminate some of the evil found in today's society and develop in other wholesome ways. The use of negative incentives as means of restraint, say by ordering people to refrain from immoral behavior or forbidding them from transgressing certain rules, is inadequate, because to uphold moral principles without wholesome enthusiasm is almost impossible. Chanta is a positive motivation, an effective agent for restraining and subduing tanha, craving. It is the key to solving all problems and all evils, and it promotes the development of all virtuous qualities. If a child loves cleanliness and order, it will be extremely difficult for the child to follow craving and careless throw rubbish on the ground. If the child makes a room untidy, it is very unlikely that the child will leave it in a mess. If someone else makes it dirty, the child won't wait for the promise of a reward before the child begins to clean it themselves. Chanda, wholesome desire, can potentially cause dukkha for virtuous, unawakened people, and even lead them to violence if they are under the sway of mental attachment. They may have insignificant mindfulness and wisdom, but wholesome desire is a vital motivation for action, and it promotes the development of all virtuous qualities, and therefore should be promoted with insight and understanding. As for the dangers posed to unawakened mundane persons, there are ways to avoid and to deal with them, which will be explained in later chapters. Of the love of truth, Dhamma chanta, or the love of goodness, kusala chanta, is strong. It can check the force of tanha, craving. When subject to tanha, to craving, one feels jealous. One sees others get something one wants, and one cannot refrain from trying to impede them from causing harm. In a similar way, when one possesses the love of goodness, one cannot stand around idly and refrain from doing good deeds, if one has not yet realized the supreme good. When chanda is stronger than tanha, craving, a student will study with all the energy and endeavor to reach the truth of the subject at hand, even though a moderate amount of study would produce good grades or good results. A merchant will try and manufacture products with real quality, even though he or she can profit from inferior products and trick the consumers who cannot recognize the difference. Civil servants and other workers will aim to accomplish the best work possible in their own area of responsibility, even though can they make a decent salary without putting forth much effort. When an employee or a co-worker achieves success, a manager or a colleague will support the success and share the benefits for the communal good. Even though he may experience envy, which is a natural response for an unawakened person. A ruler or a government official will look to the prosperity and the highest good of people and strive to provide them with knowledge and opportunities, even though the government official knows that by withholding this knowledge or these opportunities, he will gain personally and live a life of material comfort. People who can take advantage of others refrain from doing so because they fear of loss of the Dhamma, the eternal law, more than they fear a loss of personal gain. This is the opposite to tanha, craving, which refers to forfeit the truth rather than to forfeit personal gain. Indeed, it is due to this love of satchat, truth, that the Bodhisattva devoted himself for many lifetimes to perform meritorious acts for the well-being and happiness of all beings. Because he loved the knowledge of awakening, Bodhinana, he aspired resolutely towards the truth, Satchat Dhamma. As Prince Siddhartha, he relinquished his world comforts and possessions and braved a life of difficulty, cultivating the path of awakening until he realized enlightenment as Gautama Buddha.